All right, and hello everyone. Today we have a special guest on here today for the episode of Learn to Speak the Language of Your Body. Today we have Connie Holmes, who is a hypnotist coach. Is that what your title is? Is that how you say it?
Yes, I'm a
Okay.
hypnotherapist as well as a life
Okay.
coach. Yes.
So I was like, I know she has coach in there, and I second guessed myself. I was not saying it, but that's fine. Today we're going to be talking about just the brain and exploring the conscious and the subconscious mind. And I had Connie on my other show, Successfully Chaotic, and I really wanted to have her on this show because, as many of you know, I am very interested in anything to do with not only wellness but how the brain works and how the mind works, because obviously that controls everything in our body. And we got into a great discussion just offline just about the conscious and the subconscious mind. And I thought that you all would really find some value in this discussion because whether we realize it or not, it is having a big impact on your day-to-day life. So I'm going to let Connie jump in and just tell you all a little bit about herself, and then we'll get to our discussion.
Great. Thank you so much, Maria. I appreciate it. Yes, as you stated, I am a hypnotherapist, a life coach. I'm also a health coach, a published author as well, and I am a keynote speaker at different hypnosis conferences and other, different venues and things like that. I've been at a couple of nonprofit associations, annual meetings, and things like that. So anything to really get the word out, very similar to what this podcast is about, just about that connection between the mind, body, and spirit.
Absolutely. Well, and it is all connected. And I'm glad that you said that because obviously it is all connected. Because I've actually had people say, well, I only want to work on, this. I don't want to worry about this. I just want to work on this. And I'm like, well, I mean, there's nothing wrong with having that as a focus for now, but there's no way to only work on the one thing. You really need to work on everything.
Yes.
And, I think it's important to kind of realize that even if you have well, I'm going to focus on my mindset right now, or I'm going to focus on eating better right now, we have those focuses, but there's always all of those aspects in play all the time, whether we realize it or not, which kind of brings us to our discussion today. I know offline when we were chatting, we were just talking primarily we're chatting about just addiction, I think is how that kind of started, because I had a guest, Nicole Polton, on my other show talking about her journey with addiction and, all of that. And, that is a very layered conversation with lots of feelings and lots of opinions from people. But at the end of the day, there's a lot that goes into addiction. And we're not just talking about alcohol or drugs or something like that. We're talking about anything, right? And that's why I really wanted to kind of bring you on, because I really love some of the things that you were saying offline. And I was like, I've got to have you on the show to talk about this. It's so important.
Yes. Well, thank you so much. And so shall we just jump right into the
Yeah.
conscious mind, subconscious mind? Yes. So as I'm talking here, imagine, if you will, an iceberg. And so, the tip of the iceberg is relatively small in comparison to that submerged part of the iceberg. And so if you think about the tip of the iceberg representing our conscious mind. And it really is about 5 to 10% of our daily operations. And then that submerged part, just like our subconscious mind submerged deep in there, that is about 90 to 95% of our daily operations. What do I mean exactly when I say daily operations? So our conscious mind is responsible for, it's very alert, aware, it's responsible, it questions, judges, critiques, analyzes, definitely serves a really key role. Whereas our subconscious mind is that part of our mind that is open, curious, creative. That's the part of our mind where our emotions and feelings reside. It's also, many people refer to our subconscious mind as that computer program of our mind, meaning that it remembers everything. And so even if you just look at it as, again, the iceberg analogy, 10%, and I'll round and say 10% and 90%, although some people say, 5% and 95%. Even if you just look at it within that percentage, it's quite a contrast. And so that's why our conscious mind can know that what we're thinking or feeling is just not quite appropriate or right, or we have a habit or an addiction or something like that, that our conscious mind knows that. I'll use smoking as an example. Smoking is very bad for our health. There's just, years and years and years of research and proof of that. So our conscious mind knows that and knows that we need to quit. But yet that 90% where that habit, there is a little bit of an addiction with smoking, but honest to goodness, smoking is mainly a habit. And if you know a smoker, just watch their patterns. But that's why, 90% of that is sitting there in their subconscious mind. So that's why it can be rather difficult to change patterns and beliefs when it is sitting in our subconscious mind.
No, absolutely. And I like that you gave the example of smoking, particularly because there are a lot of people who have stopped smoking just by replacing that habit. They'll hold a straw, they'll hold whatever, and it's just going through those same motions that they would go through when they were smoking. And because they were still doing those things, they had a lot easier time quitting than people that used a patch, because it wasn't as much the nicotine, it seems, as it was just the habits.
Mm-hmm. Yes, 100%. And that's why, because so much is stored in that subconscious mind. And again, it's just so open and expansive and that type of thing. And that's where our belief systems reside. That's where if somebody's not feeling confident, if they are, scared of spiders, or that's me, but anything like that, that is sitting in that subconscious mind.
Absolutely. Well, and I like that you mentioned the spiders, because I think that's something that we can change, because, and I'm
Yes.
using this as an example because my mom is completely terrified of spiders, like would scream, and one of us kids would have to go
Yep.
try to save her, which we were all terrified, but she was terrified, right? It wasn't until I was, an adult and had kids of my own who also had developed mom's fear of spiders, because I would react, that I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, well, someone's got to stop this. And
Yes.
I really started learning about spiders. Now, I will say I'm not going to ever have one as a pet. They're not going to be my best friends. I'm not going to cuddle with them. But I have been able to find an appreciation for them, and I have been able to understand their purpose. And I
Mhm.
have been able to get to the level that, we have an understanding. You stay over there, I'll stay
Yep.
over here. But I don't have that fear anymore, even to the point that, and this is a lot, if you had known where I was before, I can go and pick them up with a piece of paper. I'm still
Yes.
not touching them, but I picked up with a piece of paper, and I'm like, you know what, you don't belong in here. You are going outside. And I can do that now. Which,
Yes.
if you would have known me before, you would have been like, no, that's never going to happen.
I am so glad. So let me explain that. Okay. So first of all, I am right there with you, because I did say I'm scared of spiders, and I'm scared in that you're right. They're never going to
Yeah.
be my best friend. But yet I am, believe it or not, I am to the point where I can do exactly what you're doing, where I can shoo them out. Now, if it's still a bigger, ickier one, if my husband's nearby, I'll still ask him to
Yeah.
do that.
Yeah.
But let me explain to you why that happens. So, using you as an example, if you don't mind, here is little 3-year-old Maria, who is sitting in her family living room, and you're just, playing with your toys in the living room, and life is great. And let's just say you had one of those big wolf spiders that come by you, and you're 3, you don't know what it is, you're not scared, and so you're just looking at it. Maybe you even touch it or something like that, or maybe it crawls across your foot and you don't care, because a spider doesn't mean anything to you. But then what happens is your mother's afraid of spiders. So your mom might just happen to walk in that room and sees that wolf spider crawling over your foot. She's scared. So she screams. So that kicks off little Maria's amygdala. Boom. Your amygdala opens up, because that's your fight, flight, or freeze. So here is your mother, who you love and protects you and all that stuff. And one, you hear her scream. 2, you see the fear on her face. 3, she's probably running to you to pick you up. So right there, because your fight, flight, or freeze, your amygdala was opened up. So all of a sudden, here's this little seedling that's going to get planted into your subconscious mind, saying, oh, we're afraid of spiders now. And honest to goodness, it can be that simple. And that's why you're really smart to have done what you did to rectify your fear as your kids were little, because, you really helped them out quite immensely. So kudos to you.
Well, thank you. Well, I know it's funny because I didn't know why I was doing it at the time. It was before I really started looking into the brain and, all of that, because my older kids are, 24, 23, 21, 18. Like, it was in that range when they were little. I hadn't figured out why that was important to do or even why it happened. But I did know that I didn't want them to have that same level of fear. Now,
Yeah.
the older kids still have way more fear than the younger ones because, again, I got better at it. I understood more about it. I
Yeah.
understood the importance of it. I did start learning about how their brain worked at that point, which made it even more important for me to kind of watch what I did with the kids and stuff. But at the time, obviously, you don't know what you don't know, right? But I did know I didn't want them to have that same fear because it felt
Yeah.
awful. I would always like imagine spiders everywhere, and it was just like it was awful.
Yeah.
And so, I think it's funny to look at my kids now. The older kids still do have that level of fear, not quite to where I was, but still have some. And the younger kids, especially the 6-year-old, she has that same level of, oh my gosh, it's so cute. Let's put it outside, And then my older kids are like, she is so weird. It's so weird. But I've given her a different level of thinking about it. Like, we don't touch it, because we don't know if it bites or doesn't bite. But look, it is pretty, isn't it? If you actually look at it a different way, it is pretty. And again, she's realized that. And I wish I had known all that I know now, but that's how life works, right? But it's interesting to kind of think about those things because it's exactly what we're talking about today.
Yes.
It is, that conscious and the subconscious mind. And, that same aspect can be put into play for anything, whether it's, eating or exercising or, being scared of the dark or anything or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
And so what are some things that you suggest to your clients when it comes to really getting to the point where they have a little bit more of control over that subconscious mind? Because obviously it's playing all the time while we're asleep even. So, what do you recommend people do if they're facing maybe some dangerous bad habits, ones that are, well, you mentioned smoking, and then that is bad for your health. So let's just go with that one. They really want to stop smoking. That's all they can think about. What do you recommend people do to really kind of get control of that subconscious mind?
Right. That's a really, really good question. And so what I do, one, even though hypnosis is fabulous and it's very, very effective, it's still not that 100% magic wand. So an example to support that is if somebody contacts me and they want to stop smoking, if they want to quit smoking, they need to want it. They really do need to want it. I have one very recent example to support this. And because I always ask my clients with stop smoking on a scale of 1 to 10, how badly do you want it? And I want them to be almost a 10, 8, 9, or a 10. And then I'll double check, with my questions and things like that to support, like, did they just tell me a 10 or do they really mean it? And so, once those questions support it and everything, then we'll schedule an appointment. People are a little bit different. I should say everyone's a little bit different. I think I think because, it does, it can change all the time. And this data that I'm going to share probably goes back a few months ago, but about 65-70% of my clients do stop smoking on that first session. And then that, 35-30% that need a second one, some of them, maybe half of them did light up after the first session, or some of them they didn't. So they're still a stop smoker, but they just, are having too many thoughts about it. So then that second session just puts it to bed for them, if you will. But anyways, so I had this lady come in and, she was a 10 plus and, all of my questions with her really supported that. So we had the first session and she actually smoked the very next day. And so I said, okay, no worries. That's why we have a couple of sessions and all that. But then something told me inside to ask her an extra question. And I asked her, I said, I asked you before, you came the first time to just throw away, your cigarettes and all of that. I said, so I need to make sure that you did that. But on top of your cigarettes, I need you to throw away your ashtrays as well. And I said, you can keep your lighters because you might need that for something. And when I said to throw away your entire stash, cigarettes, lighters, everything, I could hear on the phone, like that, like that shock, like, oh no. And then I told her, I said, did you hear that? And she heard it first and she's like, oh my gosh, maybe I'm not ready. And it's like, right. And so I told her though, I said, you will be soon because you've already opened the door to it. Now you just need, your everything to just finally kick in for you. And I said, and I'll be here waiting for you when you're ready for that. So, so that's just, one little example of something that honest to God just happened probably about 2 months ago.
Yeah,
So
well, and I think that people do fall into that because they do want it, but they're also scared to take that step. And I think part of that is they're afraid they're going to fail. It's almost like they
yeah,
pre-fear the failure of it.
yes.
And they've kind of, again, got that in their subconscious mind. So they're sabotaging themselves on it. And I think that that is something I've seen common even in, me working with different people on different things. And,
Yeah.
that's kind of a hard one to target because they don't even realize that's what they're doing most of the time.
Right, right. And so with that, that's where, and and I use a lot of my coaching in my work with people, even if they come to me, which is first stop smoking, which is pretty much, we can just handle that with
Mm-hmm.
hypnosis. We don't necessarily need coaching with that, but I still, for almost everything, bring in my coaching elements. And an example of that is just, letting them know that, they do need to be dedicated to it. Of course, they need to be willing and all of that, but they also need to know that whatever it is they're desiring, they are capable of it. And then just changing their mindset of, one of lack into one of abundance, or instead of focusing on what they don't want, like, oh, I can no longer smoke again, I can't have a cigarette, I can't do that. You're focusing on lack and what you don't
Yep.
want. So instead, you need to focus on, what are the positives of you no longer being a smoker? Instead of, I can't ever smoke again, it is, every day I wake up, I breathe better.
Yeah.
I mean, just saying that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I felt like I could breathe deeper as soon as you said that. And
Right.
again,
Exactly.
yeah, I
Yeah.
thought this was interesting. I was reading just on some stuff about this, and there was a study I found that said that studies using neuroimaging have shown that the brain can process information and make decisions subconsciously before the conscious awareness kicks in, and that this is really challenging the traditional notions of free will and conscious decision making. And although I kind of, some of that stuff I knew, I hadn't heard that last little statement. I was like, oh, that that's interesting, because there is a level of question there to say, okay, well, if our subconscious mind is always running and always processing and making decisions, who's in charge here?
Right, right, exactly. Well, and that is such a great example where hypnosis can help. And
Yeah.
that's why, if somebody comes to me and like a very typical thing is, I am middle aged. And let's say it's a me. I'm a 53-year-old woman. Okay. And so I'm a middle aged woman and I am an empty nester. And I just don't know what I want to do with my life. And so I feel stuck. I feel, kind of free because I'm an empty nester, but yet I'm scared, all these different things. And, so I really want to pull out, what are you feeling? Where do you feel it in your body? Coming back to your
Yeah.
podcast, because that tells us a heck of a lot too. But then after I really pull all of that out, then it's like, okay, well, how would you rather feel? Because again, our subconscious mind, that's where all of our emotions and our feelings are at. And so if you can tap into how you feel, but also how you'd rather feel, that can be something that can be a driving force as well.
Absolutely. Well, and on this show, obviously, one of our biggest focuses is just like the name says, is learn to speak the language of your body. And I think that is why this conversation is so intriguing because literally it is telling the subconscious mind is telling our body things all the time. The conscious mind does too, but the subconscious mind is telling our body so many things all the time. We just have to pay attention to what it's trying to tell us and how it's trying to tell us things. And I find that just so fascinating. I have another thing I'm going to read here because I kind of typed down a few different things here that I found just interesting while I was reading that I wanted to kind of bring up on the show for people to hear. This said research in the field of priming has showed that exposure to stimuli can influence behavior without conscious awareness. For example, individuals exposed to words related to the elderly, for example, retirement, walked more slowly after the experiment, even if they
Yes.
weren't consciously aware of them. It's because of the words. And I knew that you would love that because I know you do talk a lot about words and the power of words, and which I love that. And I do want to tell you real quick, because I seen this morning when you said empty nester. I seen it. I don't remember who posted on Facebook this morning, but somebody said, I just heard the term bird freer instead of
Oh,
empty nester. And it has changed my mindset on it.
that's
And
great.
I love that because I do have 3 kids that are moved out now. And I'm
Yeah,
not, a quote unquote empty nester yet. I have kids at home, but that's something me and my husband have talked about. Like I have never been not around kids. I'm the oldest of 4 children. My mom babysat 4 children. So there's 8 kids in my house at any given time. I have 7 children. I have never not been in a household with children. I don't know what that's going to be like. And there
right.
is a little level of fear with that, I would
Yeah,
have to say. And so I really loved that when I seen that over there, that you're just freeing them. You're freeing the birds. I'm a bird freer. There's something that
that
feels
is
better than an
so
empty
great.
nester. And
Yes.
I was like, I am going to try to remember
Oh,
that.
oh, that's beautiful. And I'm going to steal that too. So thank you for sharing
Yeah.
because you know what you just said is a great example about are we talking in lack or are we talking in abundance? And
Yeah.
so lack is empty, hello, empty, versus, what you just said, a bird
Yeah.
freer. I mean, that's so, and that also just seems so gift giving and life
Yeah.
giving, right?
Which
I
is
want to,
which is the goal as a mom, right? That's our
oh,
goal.
100%. So, okay, on that, I want to mention two things: model of the world and relational frame. I'm going to go to relational frame first, if you don't mind, because you just said whatever what you just read here a
Yeah.
moment ago.
Yeah.
Because, okay, so for me, I already told my age a while ago. I'm 53. So when I was in my early 20s, I think it was Estee Lauder had a perfume called Beautiful, and I used to wear that all the time. I don't think they make it anymore. I don't know, but I was out, this was a couple of years ago, and somebody had Beautiful on. And the minute I smelled it, it wasn't even probably halfway up my nose hairs. And the minute I smelled it, I was back on a cruise when
Oh,
I was married the first time. And I was on that cruise ship because that was the last time I really remember wearing it. It immediately catapulted me back there. The same with a pipe. I had a grandfather who smoked an old traditional
yeah.
pipe. So
Yeah.
that tobacco pipe, whenever I smell that, it's like, whoop, I am back on grandpa's lap. And so that's amazing. And what you said earlier just connected me to that. I
Yeah.
have something, my son, this was a few Christmases ago. And it's a long story that I won't go into, but we were all waiting for him to show up Christmas morning, and he ended up having an accident that nobody knew about at the time. And so he didn't show up, and it was so stressful and all these things. I'm being vague just because it's a really long story. But anyways, the shirt that I had on that Christmas morning, I went about my Christmas day. I was stressed like a crazy mother and all this stuff. And then, I washed my shirt, I put it back in the closet. I could never wear that shirt again because whenever I went through my closet and I saw that shirt, it took me back to that
Yeah.
Christmas morning. And I
Yeah.
thought, so that's, relational frame. And so that's really interesting too. And that's all our subconscious mind, because
Yeah.
all I had to do was one, smell that beautiful perfume or see that shirt hanging in my closet, and bam, in 0.2 seconds, I was right back there in both of those events. And so what you said about just almost like, however you worded that, I loved that about how you're almost there before your subconscious mind is there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, and I think it's important to kind of talk about those things because that does show the power of words. Because in that
Yes.
study, all they were saying was just the word retirement.
Yeah.
And people were walking more slowly after they had heard that word than they were before. And
Yeah.
there was a lot of research. It's called, they call it priming. There's a lot of research in that area. It is very interesting because I
Yeah.
mean, think about it. We do our daily affirmations. A lot of people are very aware of those now. And why do we do that? Is because it puts us in that frame of mind. It pumps us up, right? It gives us things to look forward to. It lets us acknowledge the things that we're grateful for, and allows us to kind of build upon that. And the same can be true if you're constantly saying like negative things. And I think that's why it's so important to kind of think about, because again, you have to learn to speak the language of your body. Your brain is trying to like tell you things all the time. If you're
Yeah.
feeling just ran down and tired and sluggish or super anxious all the time or any of those things, those are symptoms that your body's trying to say, hey, there is something going on here that we are not loving. And
Exactly.
I think it's important for people to kind of think about that. We were talking about an accident, and it made me think of just the phenomenon blind sight for people who have had their primary visual cortex like damaged and stuff. Like they actually can still respond to different stimuli that they technically can't see, and it goes to show that there's still some level of visual processing going on
Mhm.
because of the subconscious mind, which I think is so intriguing. And I know, I mean, obviously, I'm not visually impaired, but I know, like even with myself, if it's a dark room or if it is, I'm walking in somewhere and I've not even been there before, it's a dark room, you still kind of get a sense of things there. If you
Right.
really pay attention, you can kind of feel, without actually feeling, you kind of feel that there's a wall over here. You kind of feel where you are in this space. And I find that very interesting, just again with the talk of the subconscious mind, because it
Yeah.
does far more things than most people even really think about.
100%. You had mentioned back when we were talking about the spiders, and you talked about how when your older group of kids, how you were with spiders then versus your younger children. And that makes me think a little bit because when I work with clients, I really want to understand their model of the
Yeah.
world because I have a model of the world just like you do, just like our listeners do. And it's not right, wrong, or indifferent. It's just based on your environment, your upbringing, just all these different things. And so to me, when I can understand somebody's model of the world, it helps me help them quite a bit better because and then just your example with the spiders is just such a great example of it. You have one, a group of kids who are maybe borderline scared, and then the other group that they're not scared at all. And it was all because of their environment that you created when they were younger. So that's just one example of the model of the world. But our models of the world, that's where our belief systems can get dropped. I know there's so many, money mindset workshops out there and things like that. And so I know a lot of people will open it up with a question like, what's your belief on money? I know I grew up that, my mom used to say, what do you think money grows on trees? Or if I wanted something, she would say, well, go grab it off of the money tree. And I remember being a little kid and running outside like, oh, there's a money tree.
There's a
And
mind
then,
here.
and then being out there and being so disappointed. But that tells you a little bit that was a little bit of a lack, not a little
Yeah.
bit, it was a lack mindset. So to a degree, that was my model of the world that I grew up in. And so when I talk about the subconscious mind, I like to almost talk about it like a garden. We have seeds that can be planted. So, as an example, I'll just use this money tree thing that since I was going on that. So, I do remember I was probably about 6 years old. So, here's a little 6-year-old Connie running out to the backyard to this tree and like, oh, like being disappointed. So, kind of like maybe that amygdala, it's like, oh, it's not real. So, possibly here's the seed that gets planted into my subconscious mind. And, I'm sick, so I don't need too much money. But so here's this seed though. And then I don't know, I'm 10 years old and I don't know, I want the latest new pair of shoes or something like that. And I ask about it and it's like, what, do you think we're made of money? Maybe I'm, get a response like that. Well, okay, thinking of the garden of our mind. Well, oop, there goes some little water on that seed. So let's let that seed sink in just a little bit deeper, and then, and I did start working when I was young. And so it's like, just, feeling like I needed to work young and that type of thing, so here's more water on that seed. And then, so that is how it can get deeply embedded. But I also say, but if we can plant seeds, we can, well, couple things. I like to say we can plant seeds with hypnosis. Well, we plant seeds all day long as humans, I should say. So it's our decision if we want to plant a flower or a weed. But if it's a weed, we can also pull that darn thing out too.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And for people that are listening right now that really, I mean, maybe they've heard of hypnosis, and I know for people that have not really looked into hypnosis, they probably have the idea of, like the guy dangling a little thing, like a lot of people, like you see in movies. But I want you to really kind of explain to people, like, how does that work? Like in the body, in the brain, like what's going on in somebody's body and brain when they're being hypnotized, and what are some of the benefits?
Yes, I'll definitely get to the benefits. But honest to goodness, this thought popped into my head this morning as I was, thinking about being on this podcast. I think most people listening right now could probably maybe has experienced this. That remember those nights, whether we were young or it was just last weekend, but we might be sitting around a campfire. So whether we were in, the scouts or we were just, like camping with friends or whatever, and we're sitting around that campfire. And so, just the environment is nice and, comfortable, inviting, welcoming, all this kind of stuff. You're amongst people that you love and you trust and that type of thing. Well, then somebody decides that they want to start telling that scary story. And they're telling that scary story just a little bit slower. And they're talking over that campfire, and you're kind of seeing the fire go and the smoke go up in the air and things like that. And then all of a sudden, in the middle of this scary story, they do something that, they scream. I don't want to scream in the microphone, but they'll scream. And then everybody around that campfire screams. Well, you know what? That hypnotic, like sitting around that campfire and listening to that story, and you were so focused and you were so concentrated and you were so in that story that even though that whatever they hollered was around you wasn't around you, it was enough to, scare you and trigger you and that type of thing. Not that hypnosis is scary, so I don't want to apply that at all. But I'm painting with this picture at the campfire is just that even in a situation like that, that's hypnotic in that it is taking you, you're almost able to, shut down, if you will, all of the outside noise. You're no longer looking at the stars in the sky. If it's cold, you're no longer cold. If there's a breeze on your face, you don't really care because you're just really concentrated so much on that story and what that person is saying. And so that feeling is of that concentration where everything else can shut down. That's very similar to what somebody would experience in hypnosis. But then also why hypnosis is so natural. People go into hypnosis so often during the day that they don't even know it. Now, us who are, professional hypnotists, we know it because we've been trained in this. But once people do experience hypnosis, then they can realize themselves how often they truly are in a state of hypnosis throughout the day. Two great examples of it is when we're going to sleep at night, and unless you just fall right asleep, but you know how sometimes you might be falling asleep, and you're kind of in and out and that type of thing. And the same when you're waking up in the morning. Those are two examples of being your brain wave levels changing and you being in a state of hypnosis. The same being if you are, watching a movie or reading a book or just doing something, if you're at your desk working. And how many of us have had that experience where someone has said, Maria, like they have to say your name a couple of times. Well, you were in a state of hypnosis because you were so focused and so concentrated on what you were doing that you could shut everything else down. And that's why hypnosis is so effective, because with that shutting everything else down, we have bypassed what's called a critical faculty. It's almost like a bodyguard, if you will, that stands between our conscious mind and our subconscious mind. And so with that critical faculty, kind of pushed to the side, we can get to that subconscious mind. And that's where we can reprogram limiting beliefs. We can reframe limiting beliefs. We can help you change these habits from something that doesn't serve you to something that does serve you.
No, I think that's a great analogy. Because I'm like, the whole time that you even were talking about the campfire, I'm like, I could feel the
Yes.
and I think that that's a good analogy because pretty much everyone has experience sitting around the fire at, one level or another. And, I think that gives a good analogy of how that kind of feels to be kind of in that zone, that focus, deep focus zone.
Yeah.
And I've been in that exact, like you were painting my picture, except the only difference is when they start telling the scary stories, I don't feel so good. I don't like scary stories. That is not my favorite thing. But one of the things that I think is still kind of goes along with that is that I instantly go from feeling calm, relaxed, loving the dark outdoors with the fire to it's terrifying now and I don't want to be sitting here like that, and that's again, that same thing. That's that subconscious because nothing changed.
Right.
It's still the same environment. The only thing that changed was my focus.
Yes, yes, exactly. And so I mean, unlike the campfire story where someone's gonna like
Yeah.
purposely scare you or whatever, with hypnosis, then that's when we, find when was that limiting belief? When was that seed planted? And you know what? Let's look at this. Does this serve you anymore? And of course it doesn't, so let's reframe this. Let's understand it so that we can let go of it.
So, since our listeners are primarily here to learn about, wellness and mindset and all those things, what are some examples of some cases, some clients that you've had where that has been something that you've worked with them on that did kind of like affect their wellness journey, right? Whether it's been addiction, like we talked about, or maybe eating, or whatever that case may be. Can you give us just a couple of examples?
Yes, and I will give you two, and I'm going to give you you said addiction, so I'm going to give you
Hmm.
a group example, and then I'm going to give you a solo one-on-one client example. So I for the last few months, I go once a week to a local addiction recovery facility. And it's a location where people, the residents are there for anywhere between 30 and 45 days. And I really like this location because they bring in a bunch of alternative people such as me to, to help these people a little bit further and deeper. And so I talk a lot about energy,
Yeah.
about our vibrational frequency. And so I asked them, here was an example. I said, I brought in a whiteboard and I'm like, right before you came here, right before you came into this treatment center, take, for a moment, just take yourself back there and just shout out, what are some words? What were some emotions you were feeling? Well, you can imagine, shame, guilt, regret, worthlessness, hopelessness, all these heavy, heavy emotions. So then I said, okay, I said, so tell me before you came in here and when you were feeling all those heavy emotions, what was going on in your life? What were the consequences of having those emotions? And they were things like they don't talk to me anymore. I was homeless. I lost my job, like big, heavy things. So it's like, okay, so then let's go to the positive. And whether you've been here for one day or you're on your day 30 or 45, what are some emotions that you're feeling since you've been here? Well, I mean, the words were just beautiful, but, very high energy emotions. I feel hopeful. I feel gratitude, all these different things. And I'm like, okay, I said, so what have been the consequences then of these higher, I didn't even qualify it by that. I just said, what have been the consequences of you having these types of emotions? Well, they were saying things such as like, my daughter, called me out of the blue. My family's no longer frustrated with me. My boss contacted me and said, we're holding your job for you, just things like that. And that was not hypnosis, but that was just such a beautiful example. And the proof was in their own pudding, like look at how your emotional state brought in, because that vibrational energy matched those emotions that you were feeling, and the life you're living completely matches that. And so then we went into how do you change that, and we talked about gratitude and different things. So I wanted to give that because I just thought that was just such a beautiful example.
I
But
love that.
yeah, it was so powerful.
Uh,
But anyways, so then with a one-on-one client, gosh, I have so many, but probably the one that was maybe the most profound, because I think a lot of people can feel this. I had this lady contact me and she said, I am just stuck. I don't know what it is. I just don't know what it is, but I feel like I literally have a backpack on my shoulders, and it's on my back, so I can't see it, like what's in there. And so what I ended up doing with her was a protocol about going through several different emotions and reframing them.
yeah.
So we start with anger and then we go through, sadness, hurt, fear, all of these things. We start with anger always because a lot of times, things present as anger, but it's really seldom
Yeah.
anger. It's usually sadness or hurt or fear that's
Yeah.
underlying it. But we still have to tackle that first. But yeah, so what we do is we look at, when that initial sensitizing event occurred, as far as when that anger seed, I'll keep talking in the terms of a garden here, when that anger seed got planted, and they're able to look at it with their current wisdom, their new perspective, their life experience, and all of that, so that if something happened when they were quite young and they only had, like, let's say their 6-year-old little psyche to understand how to deal with it, they're able to look at it with their, again, their current wisdom, life experience, and they're actually able to see the truth in it, and then in doing that, they're able to take a learning with them and, apply that to move forward. And then with that learning, it's just so much easier to leave that negative, unproductive thought and belief behind. And so I ended up, I think it was about 8 sessions with this person. And I mean, she's like a whole new person. She said she just remembers that session where it was like that backpack just fell off, and again, just like, you don't know what that weight is, exactly what you carry, but she just, just feels so much lighter and brighter, and just not held back anymore.
No, I love that. And I can see a lot of my journey in that story completely because, a lot of us obviously have, our own traumas and things that we've gone through our lives. And you mentioned about anger, how it's very seldom anger. And, that's very much true. And a lot of other emotions kind of end up being something else that's causing that. And the reason is, again, going back to just the subconscious mind, is because having those emotions at that time, or lack thereof sometimes, right, blocking
Yeah.
emotions, served us at that time. It served us and it gave us what we needed at that time, and we don't really need it anymore. But our
Right.
subconscious mind, it's like it doesn't know that, or it's not letting us know that. It's just still kind of happening, and we don't even know why. And I like that you said that
Yes.
she had this backpack on and she didn't know what was in it, like didn't even know. She just felt the heaviness of it. And, I think that's a good analogy for, kind of as we go through life, we do have to get to the point where enough's enough. We're tired of carrying the backpack. We don't know what's in it. We don't care what's in it. We're just tired
Right.
of carrying that backpack. And once you do start unpacking it, because you just have to unpack it, because if you just throw it down, it just like, it's going to be one of those things that just like magically pops back on your back again. But, once we start unpacking it, there is a weightlessness. There is a
Right.
freedom to it, because then where I think that's us listening to our subconscious mind and us communicating back to our subconscious mind and kind of retelling kind of our story.
Yes. Yes. What 100%, because our emotions, that they're stored in that subconscious mind. And so no one wants to feel crummy emotions. No one wants to feel guilt and shame and sadness. However, it is important though to sit there with it for a moment, whatever a moment is to you, but to figure it out. One, to make sure, is it really sadness I'm feeling, or is there fear under here, or whatever it might be, because it's important to get to the root of it, because then with the root of it, then you can truly understand it and do something with it. I think it's because we don't like to be uncomfortable. So then we quickly skirt through these
Yep.
emotions. Well, then that's why the same damn, life lesson keeps coming
Yep.
back to kick us in the pants, because we never address that first one.
No, absolutely. And, I think that's important for our listeners to hear. And I do want to, I know we've kind of been talking for a little while, so I kind of want to kind of wrap it into, if somebody is listening right now and they kind of want to say, okay, well, this is a lot of information. My subconscious is dragging me through like a lot of things. What do I do about it? What's a couple of things that you could tell them to do right now to maybe try to figure out what their subconscious is trying to tell them?
I'm going to say mindfulness, one word, mindfulness. But I need to always qualify and support why I say that, because we just skirt around our days. We just get up, we do our routines, and it's just so automatic, because that's our subconscious mind operating 90% of our day.
Yep.
But when we actually can, I'm going to use food as an example. I'm going to use me as an example. Okay. So I don't watch TV too often. And so therefore I don't sit on the couch that often, but I do for probably about 30 minutes a night, just so I can sit and just have a little bit of a conversation with my husband. I notice that once my butt hits that cushion on the couch, I immediately connect to, oh, this is where I sit and have that little salty snack at about 8 o'clock at night. So then my happy butt gets up, goes to the kitchen, and starts hunting around for that salty snack. And so I do a couple of things. It's something called a pattern interrupt, and I do teach my clients this. So if I guarantee you everyone's following me on this, because who hasn't, right? So when you find but this is being mindful. So first of all, if you're super mindful, you won't even get off that couch. But but you have a little chance to catch yourself. So you're opening that pantry door, and then all of a sudden you just say out loud, "Stop." And I know you feel crazy, like screaming, "Stop," but it's enough to be a pattern interrupt, because, that mundane routine subconscious mind this is what I do: couch, up, kitchen, salty snack, open the pantry. So you need to break that with a pattern interrupt. So that helps tremendously. But what can help even more than that is because I told my husband, I'm like, I'm not going to sit here anymore. I'm going to sit over here on the couch to disconnect myself from that relational frame that I mentioned earlier, So all of that rattling story to really just support mindfulness, because when we can slow down and really pay attention to, what am I feeling? What was I thinking just even a second before I had this feeling? We can start to see those connection points, and those connection points tell us a lot. And then once we have that, it's like now seeing a book in front of us, and it's like, oh, here's a new instruction manual. I can now follow this and do something different, have a different result.
Absolutely. I think that is perfect advice. And I think that could be applicable for so many things. And I do want you to tell everyone, if they want to reach out to you and learn a little bit more about what you do, can you give them some information on how to do that?
Yes, and thank you for that opportunity. So I offer every prospective new client a free 30-minute consultation call. And that is so I can learn, what exactly is going on, what would you like differently, make sure that I can fully support you and that type of thing. And then, let you know how I work and all of that. I do see clients face to face. I'm in Janesville, Wisconsin, but I also see people, all over the world. I've actually had clients from the Middle East. So Zoom is our best friend nowadays too, right? And believe it or not, hypnosis is great via Zoom. Some people, some actually almost prefer it, because you're in the comfort and safety of your own home,
Well, and your energy is going to be isolated too. So
yeah. I mean, I definitely do a lot to, make sure that there's that connection energy and stuff, but I just wanted to throw that in there. But how you can find me is ConnieJoHolmes.com, ConnieJo Holmes, HOLMES.com. And right on my homepage, you'll see a button that says, schedule a free 30-minute consultation. And I would love to connect with you and see how, we can turn those unproductive lack thoughts and beliefs into productive abundance, so that you can live the life that you were intended to live.
I love that. And thank you so much for being on. If you're listening to this on our podcast platforms, if you could just hit the subscribe button and share it with somebody that you think would find some value in this, we would really appreciate it. And until next time.